know what's going on. But anyhow, through the 90s and so on and so forth, we ran bees basically the same way we ran bees for years. As I was telling Teresa here earlier, you got the bees ready to go in the spring, and you took them to apple pollination and blueberries, and you put supers on them, and then you went fishing. And after about this time of the year, you got the honey off the bees, and you extracted the honey, and you got the bees ready to go south, and then you went hunting. And then you got the bees to Florida, and you did some more fishing. But somewhere along about 2002, 2003, we started to see some new things happen. Of course, the mites, the varroa mite, the tracheal mite showed up in the mid-'80s, and that basically changed beekeeping from what, as an older person, I knew growing up and keeping bees through the 60s and 70s. The tracheal mites is a little mite that gets in the breathing tubes, and it causes problems. The varroa mite does this internal mite, and if you don't take care of them, they take care of you, and you're out of business. So basically, beekeepers got to the point that anything that happened to their bees or happened to them, they blamed it on something you didn't do. Because as a beekeeper, if you didn't manage your properly and didn't take care of the mites, you were basically out of the bee business. So in the early 2000s, when we started losing bees for reasons that we really couldn't lay a finger on, 2003, 2004, 2005, it became a big epidemic all across the United States, especially in the winter of 2005 and 2006 in California. Probably 45% of all the bees in California, late January, just kind of went somewhere, disappeared. And basically, everybody, well, you didn't take care of your mites. That's the answer. The mites got you. And myself, we seen things going on. It didn't really appear like a mite issue, but yeah, we got other pathogens and viruses that have been around, and so, well, maybe it's a combination of the mites and these viruses and so on and so forth. And then in October of 2006, I trucked 5 or 6 semi-loads of bees south, and the last load I took south myself in the middle of October, went back 3 weeks later, and out of 400 hives in one location, there was only 36 of them had bees left in the boxes. And it was on a gravel lot, and I got down on my hands and knees looking for bees that weren't there. I mean, there was no bees present anywhere except in these 30-some hives, and what was left in some of them wasn't more than a queen and a handful of bees. But the interesting thing was, not more than about 70 or 80 yards away, sitting through the brush, set 80 hives of bees belonging to somebody else, and I sent one of my hired guys over there to take a look at them. He came back and said, oh, they look great. And so I scratched my head for a while, and wait a minute, this didn't happen here. This is something that happened somewhere back this summer, something we brought. I knew these bees didn't have any mites. I mean, they were clean. So that wasn't a problem. So with a lot of connections to the research community at Penn State and other folks, I made them phone calls and loaded up a bunch of this dead stuff and empty stuff, and some of the beehives were alive too, and brought them back to Pennsylvania. I remember well, it was on a Sunday afternoon. I rolled into Pennsylvania. It was a cold, miserable day. I backed that truckload of stuff into my warehouse, and Penn State brought a bunch of crew down, and they combed through it, and they took all kinds of samples. And 5 days later, they called me on the phone, and they said, we see some stuff. Come look at these pictures. We got some stuff we've never seen before. And it's kind of interesting. The insides of these bees were all crystallized and discolored. Sting glands were the same way, and just a lot of things that nobody had ever seen before. And so, and I wasn't alone, but I was the one making the noise, and I'm the one that's been credited with finding this, and really I'm just the guy that made a lot of noise, so that's why I'm standing here instead of somebody else probably. But one of the things I started doing a lot of research and started thinking about, okay, so what's changed in these bees' environment? A colony of honeybees is not like a dairy cow or a goat or a sheep. You can put them right here and build a fence around them, and they're going to eat what's inside that fence. A colony of honeybees you set them down here and they're going to forage for miles in both directions, at least 2 or 3 miles in each direction. So you can't control what they're bringing in from the outside. So, as I said before, you know, I got some background in agriculture and so on, and I started thinking about, so what's changed in agricultural practices around the country and in our environment, not just agriculture, but in the suburban areas and in our lawn cares and so on and so forth. And the thing that really changed was we went to systemic pesticides in the early 2000s. I mean, it's just a mass wave of going from the old hard knock 'em down organic phosphates and other chemicals to the systemics, which according to the manufacturers, you know, are safe, you know, they don't hurt people and so on and so forth. And I started doing, I really wasn't much of a computer person, so I put my wife working on the computer in the daytime, and while we were off working bees or doing something else, and she would bring up all this stuff that I start looking at, and basically started finding research that was done by the pesticide folks that basically showed exactly the same thing going on in subterranean Mediterranean termites and other insects that they were trying to control, that basically caused those insects memory, just a whole vast of things that we were seeing going on. But at the same time, we started, the research community did not have a lot of information on bees from back in the past. Unfortunately, here in the state of Maine, we have Tony Jazak, who's a state apiary inspector, and we've always joked with Tony since the 70s about him hoarding dead bees. He collected a lot of bees, put them away in the freezer, and he's got all kinds of bees stored away in freezers, costing you taxpayers in the state of Maine a lot of electricity to run them freezers. But anyhow, the good news is that we had these samples from way back when. And we started finding, and as the scientists started looking at these bees, they started finding pathogens and viruses that we didn't even know that existed. And one of them that's made a lot of noise is Enzema cerana, which is a gut disease. And everybody thought this is something new. But now, going back and looking at Tony's old samples stored away in the freezers, in my own bees, I mean samples of my own stuff that he took here in Maine back in the mid-80s, cerana was already here. So we have, you know, we have the chemical companies on this side saying, well, you know, it's you guys moving your bees, it's your pathogens, your viruses, your mites, and so on and so forth. That is part of the problem, but something happened to break down the immune system, and this is one of the things that these scientists have found, that the immune systems have been broken down. And so when you break down immune system, it's like people, you know, an elderly person gets something wrong with them, and then they get something else wrong with them, and then they get something else wrong with them, and winter comes and it's cold, and you're having a funeral. And so that's basically what's going on with the bees. You're being stressed. Yes, we're moving these bees across the country, and that's a stress. I've been moving bees for 40, she says 1 minute, I've been moving bees for 40 years, or well, mostly 50 years actually, and we didn't see these problems back then. So something has really changed in our environment. Whether it's the neonics by themselves or the combination with all the other things that are out here, but as the university people look at this stuff, and Penn State, who's been leading the charge along with, you know, people like Kim here and others and Frank, they're finding high levels of contaminants, not just pesticides and fungicides and herbicides and them kind, all kinds of other things. They're finding the pollen and in the honeycomb. Honeycomb's like a sponge. The pollen the bees gather, they stick it in there. It's like silage in your feed your cattle. You know, you put it all together and it migrates in between there. So my story to finish up here is, this is like you and I going to chemistry class and we played around with chemicals when the teacher wasn't around, you know, and nothing happened. The next day we took the same thing and we put them all together, and all of a sudden we had a little explosion. The next day we tried it all over again and it wouldn't happen. So that's exactly what's going on out here in the environment. It's really hard to replicate what them bees are getting and bringing back, because the variety of their diet and where the plants they travel around to are so great that these folks doing their job are having a tremendous time, a hard time to put the nail in the coffin.
So, Dave, 5 more minutes if you ask some good questions. Any questions?
You just used the word I don't recognize, neonic.
Neonics are systemic pesticides. Basically, that's the new class of pesticides that, you know, all the major manufacturers, you know, they've gone from the hard organic phosphates to chlorines and everything else. What happens is, okay, either seed coat like corn and soybeans, they seed coat them. You've heard of Grub-X that we put on lawns, that's a systemic. What happens is it goes in the plant, grows up through the plant, and basically what happens, the insect comes that sucks on that plant or eats at that plant, gets sick, and don't want to eat. Well, you know what happens, you don't want to eat. Eventually, you're not around anymore. And, you know, but it's safe, supposedly, quote, quote, safe technology for humans. That's debatable, too, because this stuff really migrates into the water space. They're in the back.
How do you like to take care of your mites?
How we like to take care of our mites?
How do you try to take care of your mites?
We're using a lot of thymol products. We actually make our own stuff. We use a lot of essential oils. If you go on our website, which is hackenbergapiaries.org, there's a lot of recipes on there. Everything I got's free. If we make it for you, it's not free, but the recipes are on there. They're free. One of the other things that we have done since the high losses of bees is with all this contaminants in their environment and the food they're bringing in, one of the things we have found is that feeding protein to bees on pretty much a non-stop basis through the summer, spring, summer, early, and feeding them in has really been a help to keep, you know, their immune systems built up. Soy has always been has been a big use in protein, but one of the things that my big concern is, and I was born and raised in the around the feed business and so on, and soy is a cheap food, and it's not, you know, I don't know if there's any people in the audience growing soybeans, I'm sorry, but it's not as good a food as what I need to put. So what we've developed a product that's actually got eggs and brewer's yeast in it, and you can go online, you can take a look at it, and the recipes are all there. Back here.
Yes. Can you clarify? You said that the folks who were doing something with pesticides came to the same conclusion. Is that folks studying the effects of pesticides or people that were manufacturing them?
Repeat your question, please.
Okay. I heard you say that your wife and you were doing research about the effect of pesticides. And then you said
there used to be lots of, when you went on the websites of the major chemical manufacturers, there used to be lots of stuff on there that you as a normal person could sit there, and if you knew what you were looking for, you could, that stuff's all disappeared.
Okay, so it was from the manufacturer.
Right, that's right.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Correct.
Thank you.
One of the studies that the manufacturer of, you know, the main manufacturer of this stuff paid the state of Florida to do is a study on sub-Mediterranean termites. I mean, they use it on sub-Mediterranean termites. And basically it causes the termites to quit grooming, lose their way home, quit eating. And basically when I read this study, it was done by the University of Florida, it was just like looking at what was going on inside a beehive.